What I'm going to read to you next is an author statement and a story I submitted that is going to be in a future zine. When it comes to the Aboriginal and First Nations people of Canada, the residential school system left not only its mark, but its shadow on Canadian history. A systemic removal of Aboriginal and First Nations children from their families that resulted in cultural disintegration and a severe loss of Aboriginal identity amongst entire ancestral generations, arguably going down as one of the greatest tragedies to happen during the 19th and 20th century. But what happened to the next generation? My story is not about residential schools, but rather what happened in the era afterwards, the era of the Canadian foster care system, and the lasting impacts that it has had on Aboriginal and First Nations children to this day. In Alberta alone, Aboriginals represent about 8 or 9% of total population, yet close to 50% of the children in foster care are Aboriginal, with that percentage increasing every year. My story details a personal account of what one foster home was like for me as a young child growing up in the 1980s in southern Alberta on the Blood Reserve. When entered into the system, foster children have a lot to adjust to. There's the experience of leaving family life behind for the first time and being taken into someone else's home. There's also the experience of the foster homes themselves, the foster parents, their families, their psychological state, their lifestyles, their beliefs. The experience can differ from the extremely positive to the extremely negative. There are mental, emotional, and physical abuses that many foster care children suffer through. Often these downfalls experienced while in the system can be damaging to who these children become as adults. Though today I consider myself a part of the urban Aboriginal youth populace, I have often looked back at my own memories in the foster care system as fragments of my generation's residential schools. I see my childhood memory as my way of taking account for a part of my own history. Because unlike residential schools, I don't know if anyone will remember the foster care system or if it too will go down in Canadian history. But what I do know and can recognize is that it did happen, and that history, good or bad, is now a part of my Aboriginal identity and a part of my story to tell others. A childhood memory in a Hollywood movie is often depicted as a time full of magic, fun, and innocence, as it should be. It brings us back to the days when junk food was a sweet highlight, and where boredom seems to be non-existent because there was always so much to do. In the midst of traveling backward through the awkward memories of my youth, I caught a glimpse of a part of my past I thought had been gone forever. By the age of 5, I was the youngest of 4 female siblings living in a foster care home. As the home was out on the Blood Reserve, a First Nations community, a part of southern Alberta, we were most often isolated from the rest of the world. Although we had a roof over our heads and food in our bellies, we were scared, unhappy children. The 2 main reasons that lay behind our unhappiness were the small facts that we didn't live with our birth mother, and the woman chosen for her replacement physically abused us. Under my illusion presented by the great television screen, this was by all means not the kind of childhood experience I had hoped for. But because of this very experience, I later came to realize that through the eyes of childlike imagination, I could escape, to be able to transform even the harshest realities that life could bring into moments of pure joy and happiness. My memory of my foster mother was one of pain and fear that had always guaranteed sorrow. She always seemed so big and scary to me. She was the kind of authority who commanded respect through every fiber of her being. She was never to be questioned and never to be disobeyed. My sisters were all older than I was, so I was more of a follower than anything else. When we came to stay with our foster mother, I was the one who got in the most trouble because I couldn't think fast enough. And I was incredibly shy. It was like everything I did was wrong. The lasting effect was that later in my life, I perceived myself to be stupid and always had low self-esteem. I'd felt confused about everything I'd come to believe in my past. How could such a wonderful world had gone so terribly wrong? And the scariest thing about it was that no one on the outside world knew. This was something that led me to believe that we would be stuck there forever. The abuse was much more than the average slaps across the face or a surprising yank of the hair. It was watching my older sister get beat up with a blue metal dustpan. It was things like being sent outside in the dead of winter without shoes, with only my socks to protect me from the snow. But maybe what was worse was the feeling of being so helpless, of knowing that you couldn't do anything about it even if you tried. It always made me feel like a coward. Injustice that would happen over and over again brought on a kind of resentful anger and torment that could ever be known possible to exist in the heart of a 5-year-old. I tried so hard to do nothing wrong for fear of what might happen to me if I ever messed up. Every day became a war zone, with hope of leaving acting as my only means to survive. Sunlight and fresh air were the things that kept me sane. That and my imagination. Imagination gave me the ability to escape whatever troubles or fears that may have laid ahead in my daily life. The chance came on a late fall, overcast day. Completing our slave labor early in the afternoon, our foster mother had driven into town for groceries and what other provisions that were needed for that month. This usually meant she would be gone all day, something that was always a relief. Grabbing our coat and gumboots, we headed outside in search for something exciting to do. We needed to spend our time wisely because we never knew when our next chance at freedom would be. The ground was hard and the air was chilly. A couple of stray dogs fought over the last remains of a scrap of bread. No one could hear the squawking of crows in the distance, and just looking at the deserted surroundings, I was once again overwhelmed with hopelessness. Past an old rotted corral that roamed 2 horses was a forest that was full of lifeless trees, killed off by the coming of winter. This would be the source of our adventure for the day. We ran quickly, pretending that we were running away from the house forever. One after the other, we followed from oldest to youngest along a narrow dirt path, like a troop on a twisted jungle safari. The woods were dark and mysterious. The temperature wasn't cold enough for snow, but it was still cold enough so I could see my breath. Although we had no clue where our final destination would be, we were merely content being inside the strange environment. We were more than willing to go anywhere to get away from our old world. So after we found the place that intrigued my interest, it was a circular part of the forest where all the trees had been cleared out, giving the image of a vacated room. Wouldn't this be perfect for our own house? I exclaimed. Yeah, it's too bad we wouldn't have any walls or a ceiling, Sarah, my eldest sister commented, dismissing my childish way of thinking. Reluctantly, I followed my sisters as they moved on deeper into the forest. Were it not for our next encounter of the nearest town's dump, our magical place of fun and fantasy might never have been thought of. The dump was a disgusting, grungy place to be, but we still stayed to check out its possible treasures. It was full of broken bottles, coffee grinds, baby diapers, and every other unwanted product that one could have possibly imagined. Picking up an empty milk carton, I stared down at it, wiping away the clotted mud on the cover. By this time, all of us were scattered looking for our own different treasures. Suddenly, it seemed that the same idea hit us all at the same time. We could make our own house, and this gave us the means to do it. For the next half hour, we sorted through the trash, picking out what could be used for our new shelter. As luck would have it, my sisters found an old beat-up couch with all the cushions still intact, and a small mini fridge. We brought everything our arms could carry and put it in a big pile in the middle of our pretend house. My 2 oldest sisters stayed behind to decorate, while my second oldest sister and I ran back to get empty egg cartons and assorted food packages that could be used to fill our fridge. We'd imagined that we were going shopping, that everything that had happened was actually real, and that for once, I didn't feel afraid or lonely. By the time we were finished creating our new abode, it was beautiful. We had the living room, bedroom, and kitchen, which was complete with a table and chipped dishes. We even had a rug and a television box with a picture of a TV on it. By the time we were completed everything, the afternoon light had turned into a blue evening glow. We all knew that the time was nearing for us to return home, for if we didn't, we'd surely get lost in the woods because we wouldn't be able to see the path back. But at the same time, no one wanted to leave. When it was time to go,